Welcome back to Nightfall lore. Tonight we are doing something a little different. We are leaving Arnhem behind. No more blood, no more beasts, no more cobblestone streets and church bells. Tonight we go east to a place of mountains and cherry blossoms and old, quiet temples where monks have forgotten how to pray. Tonight we go to Ashina. Get comfortable. You know the drill by now. Find your spot, grab your blanket, and let the story do the rest. If you fall asleep halfway through, good. That means it worked. And if you stay up for the whole thing, I am glad to have you. As always, I love imagining where you're all listening from around the world, so feel free to drop a hello in the comments. Let me know where you are and what time it is where you are. Alright, settle in. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a FromSoftware game that tells its story a little differently from what we are used to. There are no item descriptions hiding the plot in their margins. The people in this story talk to you, they look you in the eye, they tell you what they want and what they are afraid of and why they are about to do the thing you wish they would not do. It is a clearer story than Bloodborne or Dark Souls, but do not mistake clarity for simplicity. What sits underneath the surface here is just as deep and just as dark as anything FromSoftware has ever made. At its heart, Sekiro is a story about immortality, not the kind you would want. The kind that poisons the water and rots the soil and turns good people into things they would not recognize if they saw themselves in a mirror. Everyone in this story is chasing it or running from it or being destroyed by it. A boy who carries it in his blood and wants it gone. A shinobi who was given it without asking and cannot stop paying the price. A grandfather who refuses to seek it even as his kingdom crumbles. A grandson who will sacrifice everything to get it. Monks who abandoned their faith for it. A father who betrayed his own son for it, and beneath all of them, flowing through the soil like a slow poison, the waters of a dragon that came from a land no one remembers and planted itself in the mountains of a country that was never meant to hold it. We are telling the whole thing tonight, start to finish. The dragon, the waters, the boy and his shinobi, the father who was never really a father, the monks and their centipedes, the old man who carved Buddhas to keep from becoming a demon, the kingdom that tried to live forever and learned too late why that was never a good idea. Every chapter, every betrayal, every ending, all of it. All right, let us begin. To understand the story of Sekiro, you first need to understand a single image, a battlefield, not a grand or famous one, just one of 1,000 anonymous killing fields scattered across Sengoku-era Japan, where soldiers who would never be remembered fought and died for lords whose names would be forgotten within a generation. The grass is trampled, the mud is dark with blood. Crows circle overhead, patient and certain in the knowledge that the earth will provide. And in the middle of this field, among the bodies of men who have finished their last war, a child is wandering. He is small, he is alone, he has no name that we will ever learn, no family that the story will acknowledge, no history before this moment. He exists only as a small figure walking through an aftermath, stepping over the arms and legs of the dead, with the numb, blank expression of someone who has seen so much horror that horror has become background noise. He is a war orphan. Japan in the Sengoku period produced, then by the thousands, children whose parents were conscripted or killed, whose villages were burned, whose entire world was erased in a single afternoon by the passage of an army that did not care enough to notice what it crushed underfoot. Most of these children died. They starved. They froze. They were taken by disease or by predators, human and animal alike, who saw in their smallness and their loneliness an easy opportunity. This child should have died too. He would have, if not for the man who found him. The man's name was Owl. He was a shinobi, a shadow warrior, a man who had made his living in the spaces between the great powers of the age, selling his skills to whoever could pay, and his loyalty to no one. He was tall and broad and possessed of a physical presence that made the air around him feel heavier. He moved through the battlefield with the practiced ease of someone who had seen so many of them that they no longer registered as anything remarkable. He was looking for something. Useful tools, perhaps. Weapons to salvage. Information that could be sold. Whatever it was, what he found instead was the boy. There is no tenderness in how Owl takes the child. There is no moment of softening, no flash of paternal warmth that cracks through the hardened exterior of a man who has spent his life killing for money. Owl looks at the boy and sees potential. He sees raw material. He sees a body that can be trained and a mind that can be shaped and a will that, if properly broken and rebuilt, can be made into something useful. He takes the boy the way a craftsman takes a piece of unworked steel from a pile of scrap, not out of love, but out of recognition that there is something here worth shaping. He names the boy Wolf, not a human name, a designation, a label for what the boy is going to become. Wolves are loyal. Wolves are obedient. Wolves follow the pack leader without question, and kill without hesitation when the order is given. This is what Owl wants, not a son. A weapon with a heartbeat. The name strips the child of whatever identity he might have carried before, whatever name his dead parents gave him, whatever life he might have lived if the battlefield had not swallowed everything. From this moment forward, the boy is Wolf, and Wolf belongs to Owl, and that is the beginning and the end of who he is allowed to be. The training that follows is brutal. Owl raises Wolf in the shinobi tradition, which is to say he raises him in the tradition of silence and obedience and the absolute subordination of the self to the mission. The boy learns to fight before he learns to read. He learns to kill before he learns to question. He is taught the ways of the sword and the shuriken and the art of moving through the world without being seen, of becoming a shadow that can cut throats. He is trained alongside other figures who will reappear later in the story, most notably Lady Butterfly, an illusionist and assassin of extraordinary skill who serves as one of his mentors and who, in the way of shinobi, views her student with a cold professional appraisal that is entirely free of affection. At the centre of Wolf's training is a doctrine called the Iron Code. It is the law that governs the life of every shinobi, the fundamental principle upon which their entire existence is built. The Iron Code is simple. It has only a few tenets, but the most important one is absolute. The shinobi exists to serve their master. The master's life comes before the shinobi's own. The master's will is the shinobi's purpose. There is no room for personal desire. There is no space for doubt. The shinobi is a tool, and a tool does not question the hand that wields it. Owl teaches Wolf the Iron Code the way you teach a dog to sit. Through repetition, through correction, through the systematic removal of any impulse that might interfere with obedience. And Wolf learns. He learns so well that by the time he is grown, the code is not something he follows. It is something he is. His identity and his duty have been fused together so completely that separating them would be like trying to separate the blade from the edge. What Wolf does not yet know, what he will not learn until much later, is that Owl's version of the Iron Code contains a hidden clause, a second layer of loyalty that supersedes the first. The father comes before the master. If the shinobi must choose between obeying his lord and obeying the man who raised him, the man who raised him wins. Owl has built a weapon, yes, but he has built it with a back door, a secret override that only he can activate. Wolf is not just a tool, he is Owl's tool, and everything that follows in this story will eventually come down to the question of whether the boy will remain the weapon his father made him, or become something else entirely. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can understand the choice that will define Wolf's life, we need to understand the world he lives in. We need to understand Ashina. Japan in the Sengoku period was a country at war with itself. The old order had collapsed. The central government was powerless. Warlords carved out territories and defended them with armies of samurai and ashigaru. Common soldiers pressed into service by loyalty or desperation, or the simple lack of anything better to do. Alliances shifted like sand. A lord who was your friend in the morning might be your enemy by nightfall, and the only constant was the certainty that someone, somewhere, was always planning to take what you had. In the mountains of this fractured nation, surrounded by snow-capped peaks and deep valleys and forests so old that the trees seemed to remember time before humans, there was a land called Ashina. It was not a large domain, it was not a wealthy one. It possessed no great port, no fertile plains, no strategic position that would make it valuable on a warlord's map. What Ashina had was something else. Something that could not be measured in rice or gold or the number of swords it could field. Ashina had the waters, beneath the mountains, flowing through hidden channels in the rock, seeping up through the soil and collecting in underground reservoirs that no one had ever fully mapped. There were waters that should not have existed. They were cold and clear and possessed a quality that defied every law of nature that the people of the age understood. These waters could heal, not in the ordinary way that clean water and rest can heal a sick body. These waters could pull a man back from the edge of death. They could close wounds that should have been fatal. They could restore strength to limbs that should have withered, and in certain places, in certain concentrations, under certain conditions that no one fully understood, these waters could do something even more remarkable. They could stop death entirely. The people of Ashina had known about the waters for generations. They were woven into the folklore of the region, part of the deep, quiet mythology that every mountain village passes down through its grandmothers and its shrine maidens. The waters were sacred. They were a gift from the land itself, or from whatever spirit or god had chosen to make its home in these particular mountains. To drink from them was a blessing. To bathe in them was a ritual. To speak of them too loudly or too casually was a kind of blasphemy that the old people warned against with a seriousness that suggested they had seen what happened to those who did. But the waters were also a resource, and in the Sengoku period, resources were the currency of survival. 20 years before the events of the game, the land of Ashina was under the control of foreign lords. The people had been subjugated, their independence stripped away. their sacred places occupied by soldiers who had no understanding of what lay beneath their feet and no interest in learning. The Ashina were a conquered people, and conquered peoples in the Sengoku period did not generally remain peoples for very long. They were absorbed, dispersed, forgotten. And then Isshin came. Isshin Ashina was a swordsman of extraordinary ability. The word the game uses to describe him is Sword Saint, a title that is not given lightly in a world where the sword is the measure of all things. He was not merely skilled, he was transcendent. He fought with a clarity and a precision that made other warriors look like children swinging sticks. His blade moved like thought itself, arriving at the point of contact before the eye could track it, and when he cut, the cut was perfect. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no gap between intent and execution. Isshin Ashina was the sword made human, and when he decided that his homeland would be free, the foreign lords who occupied it learned very quickly that some mountains are not worth dying on. His name alone was enough to change the course of a battle. Men who had never seen him fight would lay down their arms at the rumour of his approach, because the stories that preceded him were so extraordinary that disbelief felt like a safer option than standing in his path. The coup was bloody. It had to be. Isshin did not have numbers or supplies or the backing of any major power. What he had was himself, and a small band of followers who believed in him with the absolute conviction that only a truly great leader can inspire. They fought through the valleys and the castle towns and the mountain passes, taking back their homeland one battle at a time, leaving behind them a trail of dead soldiers and burning watchtowers and the growing legend of a swordsman who could not be stopped. The foreign lords sent their best against him. He cut through them. They sent their armies. He broke them. They sent assassins in the night. He was waiting for them. And when it was over, when the last foreign soldier had been driven out or killed, Isshin stood at the top of Ashina Castle and looked out over the land he had reclaimed, and knew that holding it would be even harder than taking it, because the central government was still consolidating. The interior ministry, the political apparatus that was slowly grinding the independent domains of Japan into a single unified nation, had not forgotten about Ashina. They had simply been patient. They knew that a single domain, no matter how fiercely defended, could not hold out forever against the weight of an empire. Isshin's rebellion had bought Ashina 20 years of freedom, but the clock was always ticking, and everyone knew it. The Ashina that exists when the game begins is a place of contradictions. It is beautiful and it is dying. The cherry blossoms still bloom on the mountainside. The temples still ring their bells at dawn. The common people still go about their lives, farming and fishing and raising their children in the shadow of a castle that has protected them for 2 decades. But there is a tension in the air that you can feel from the first moment you set foot in the outskirts. The soldiers on the walls are thinned out, the supply lines are stretched, the conversations you overhear are about rationing and retreat, and the question that no one wants to ask out loud: how long do we have? Isshin built something real. He did not just conquer a territory, he created a homeland, a place where people could live with dignity, and where the old ways, the traditions of sword and shrine, and the quiet respect for the land that sustained them could survive the chaos of the Sengoku period. The people of Ashina loved their home with the fierce, particular love that comes from knowing how easily it could be taken away. They have seen the armies massing beyond the mountains. They have heard the rumours of the Interior Ministry's plans, and they have made the quiet, collective decision that if Ashina must fall, they will make the falling cost more than anyone is willing to pay. This is the world Wolf enters when he climbs out of the well, a kingdom at the end of its life, surrounded by enemies, sustained by an old man's reputation and the strange waters that flow beneath the soil. A place where the mundane and the miraculous exist side by side, where a farmer tending his field can look up and see a giant serpent coiling through the valley beyond, and where the prayers offered at the local shrine are answered by forces that the people praying do not fully understand. By the time the game begins, Ishin is old. He is sick. The sword saint who carved a nation out of blood and willpower is confined to his chambers, coughing blood into silk handkerchiefs, and the kingdom he built is crumbling around him. The Interior Ministry's armies are massing at the borders. The Ashina generals are arguing about strategy. The common people are afraid. And into this dying kingdom, like vultures circling a wounded animal, come the people who want what Ashina has always had: the waters, the immortality, the power to escape the one thing that no amount of swordsmanship can defeat: death itself. And this is where the story truly begins, not with a battle or a betrayal or a dramatic revelation, but with a simple, human desire. The desire to not die. The desire to hold on to the people we love and the places we call home and the lives we have built, even when the world is telling us clearly and unmistakably that it is time to let go. Every tragedy that follows, every monster and every massacre and every broken oath grows from this single seed. The refusal to accept what is, the insistence on reaching for what should not be, the ancient, universal, deeply human conviction that there must be a way around the one thing that no one, in all the history of the world, has ever found a way around. To understand why the waters of Ashina possess the power they do, you have to look beyond Japan. You have to look west, across the sea, to a place the game never names but clearly implies is somewhere on the Asian continent, perhaps China, perhaps further still, because the power that flows beneath Ashina's mountains did not originate there. It came from somewhere else. It was carried across the ocean by a being that the people of Ashina would come to call the Divine Dragon. The Divine Dragon is one of the most visually striking encounters in the entire game. When you finally reach it, high above the clouds in the Fountainhead Palace, it appears as an immense ethereal being of pale white wood and silver bark, its body shaped like a tree that has learned to move, its single arm holding a sword that crackles with lightning. It is beautiful. It is ancient, and it is not supposed to be here. The lore tells us, in fragments scattered across item descriptions and dialogue, that the divine dragon travelled from the west. It came across the sea and took root in the land of Ashina, and when it did, its essence seeped into the soil and the water and the stone. The rejuvenating waters, those miraculous springs that can heal wounds and stave off death, are not a natural feature of the landscape. They are the blood of the dragon, its life force, leaking through the earth like sap from a wounded tree, infusing everything it touches with a vitality that is divine in origin and deeply, fundamentally wrong for the mortal world it has entered. The dragon brought something else with it. At the place where it took root, a tree grew, the Everblossom, a sakura tree of impossible beauty. its blossoms perpetually in bloom, its branches heavy with flowers that never fall and never wither. The Everblossom is not merely a tree, it is the cradle of the dragon's power, the physical anchor that connects the divine essence to the mortal earth. As long as the tree stands, the waters flow. As long as the waters flow, the land of Ashina is touched by something that the natural world was never meant to contain. The tree is beautiful beyond description, its branches heavy with blossoms that glow faintly in the dark, and it stands at the centre of the Fountainhead Palace, like the heart of a body that has been beating for far too long. Everything in Ashina, every miracle and every curse, every healing spring and every corrupted monk can be traced back to this tree and the dragon that planted it. The people who lived near the Everblossom were the first to change. They were the first to drink the waters, the first to feel the strange vitality that coursed through every stream and every well in the region. And over time they became something more than human, or perhaps something less. The nobles of the Fountainhead Palace, those ethereal decadent figures you encounter near the end of the game, are the descendants of the people who lived closest to the source. They have been drinking the waters for so long that their bodies have been remade by them. They are tall and pale and move with a languid grace that suggests they have forgotten what urgency feels like. They are immortal, or close enough to it that the distinction no longer matters. But their immortality is not a gift, it is a stagnation. They do not grow, they do not change, they do not create or build or strive for anything. They simply exist, floating through their palace above the clouds, drinking their sacred waters, watching the centuries pass with the empty glassy eyes of fish in a bowl. This is the first warning the game offers about the nature of immortality. The waters grant life, yes, but it is a life without purpose, a life without direction, a life that has been so thoroughly drained of the possibility of ending that it has also been drained of the motivation to do anything with the time it has been given. The nobles of the Fountainhead Palace are not evil. They are not cruel, not in any deliberate sense. They are simply empty. They have been alive for so long that the concept of being alive has lost all meaning, and they drift through their beautiful prison like ghosts who have forgotten they are dead. The dragon's power also manifests in another way, one that is far more dangerous and far more central to the story. The waters do not merely sustain life, they can create a bond between the living and the dead, a connection that transcends the ordinary boundary of mortality. This is the dragon's heritage, the gift that is carried in the blood of a very specific lineage, and it is the thing that everyone in Ashina wants, and no one in Ashina should have. His name is Kuro. He is young, he is gentle. He speaks with a quiet, measured kindness that makes him sound older than he looks, as though the burden he carries has aged him from the inside. He is the divine heir, the last living vessel of the dragon's heritage, and his blood contains the most dangerous substance in the world. The dragon's heritage is not the same as the rejuvenating waters, though they share a source. The waters heal, they restore. They can, in extreme concentrations, prevent death. But the heritage does something far more specific and far more terrible. It grants true immortality, the kind that cannot be undone by wound or sickness or the passage of time, and it can be shared. Kuro can grant his immortality to others through a bond of blood, creating what the game calls an oath, a connection between the divine heir and his sworn protector that ties their fates together across the boundary of death. This is what makes Kuro so valuable to everyone who knows what he is. In a world where kingdoms rise and fall on the strength of their armies and the skill of their warriors, a boy who can make soldiers immortal is not a person. He is a weapon of unestimable strategic value. An army that cannot die would be an army that cannot lose, and whoever controls such an army would control Japan itself. But Kuro does not want to be a weapon. This is the thing that separates him from almost every other character in the story, and makes him, in many ways, its moral center. He has seen what the heritage does. He has seen how the promise of the immortality corrupts the people who seek it, how it turns wise men into fools and loyal servants into traitors, and entire institutions into grotesque parodies of what they were meant to be. And he has decided, with the quiet, absolute conviction of a child who has thought very carefully about something and arrived at the only conclusion that makes sense to him, that the heritage must be destroyed. He wants to sever it. He wants to perform a ritual that will cut the connection between the dragon's power and the mortal world, ending the flow of the rejuvenating waters, removing the possibility of immortality from the land of Ashina forever. He knows that this will almost certainly cost him his life. He accepts this. He accepts it not with the dramatic, performative martyrdom of a hero in a story, but with the quiet, sad pragmatism of someone who has looked at the math and determined that one life is a fair price for ending a curse that has poisoned an entire kingdom. Kuro's decision places him in opposition to almost everyone around him. The Ashina clan wants his blood to create an immortal army. The monks of Senpou Temple want his blood to achieve their twisted version of enlightenment. His own protector, Wolf, is bound by an oath that makes Kuro's death an impossibility, because if Kuro dies, Wolf's reason for existing dies with him. Everyone wants Kuro alive, but Kuro wants to end the thing that makes him valuable, which means that protecting him and honouring his wishes are two goals that may be fundamentally incompatible. This is the central tension of the entire story. Not a conflict between good and evil, but a conflict between love and duty. Between the desire to protect someone and the obligation to respect their choice, even when that choice is to die. There is a small detail about Kuro that is easy to overlook, but that says everything about who he is. He makes rice balls. He cooks them himself in his chamber at the top of Ashina Castle, and he offers them to Wolf whenever the shinobi visits. It is a gesture of such ordinary domestic kindness that it feels almost out of place in a game about immortal dragons and parasitic centipedes, but that is precisely the point. Kuro is not a saint or a mystic or a noble archetype. He is a child who makes rice balls for the person he cares about, because that is the kind of person he is. He cannot fight, he cannot wield a sword, he cannot protect himself from any of the forces that want to use him. The only power he has is the power to be kind, and he wields it with a consistency that puts every warrior in the game to shame. The dragon's heritage passed to Kuro through a lineage the game does not fully explain. We know that there were other divine heirs before him. We know that the heritage moves through bloodlines, selecting certain individuals for reasons that have more to do with the dragon's inscrutable will than with any human logic. The previous divine heir, whose grave can be found near the dilapidated temple, carried the same burden and faced the same impossible choice. Their solution, whatever it was, did not end the cycle. The heritage continued. The waters kept flowing, and eventually the power found its way to a gentle boy who spent his evenings making rice balls and reading books and wondering whether the world would be better off without the gift he never asked to receive. Kuro's relationship with Wolf is the emotional spine of the entire game. It is not a relationship between equals. Kuro is the master, Wolf is the servant. The power dynamic is clear, and the Iron Code enforces it with the weight of generations of tradition. But Kuro does not treat Wolf as a servant. He treats him as a person. He asks about his well-being. He worries about the cost of the resurrections. He offers his rise balls not as a lord bestowing a favour on a retainer, but as a friend sharing a meal. And it is this treatment, this simple, radical act of seeing the human being inside the weapon, that gives Wolf the foundation he needs to become something more than what Owl made him. When Kuro grants Wolf the dragon's heritage on the night of the Hirata estate, he is not making a strategic calculation. He is not thinking about future battles or the preservation of Ashina or the political implications of binding a shinobi to an immortal bloodline. He is looking at a man who is about to die, a man who fought to protect him when no one else would, and he is making the only choice that his heart will allow. Live, he says. Please live. And in that moment, the heritage stops being a curse and becomes, however briefly, an act of love. The Shinobi Code is not a philosophy. It is not a set of guidelines or a collection of wise sayings to be contemplated over tea. It is a cage, a beautifully constructed, perfectly efficient cage built from the bones of obedience, and Wolf has been living inside it for so long that he can no longer see the bars. The Iron Code, as Owl taught it to Wolf, is a hierarchy of loyalty with no room for the self. At the top is the father, below the father is the master, below the master is the mission, and at the very bottom, so far down that it barely registers as a consideration, is the shinobi himself. Wolf's desires do not matter. Wolf's opinions do not matter. Wolf's sense of right and wrong, his feelings about the people he kills and the orders he follows, his private, unspoken longing for something that might resemble a normal human life, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is the code, and the code says obey. For most of Wolf's life, this system worked. It worked because the two loyalties at the top of the hierarchy were never in conflict. Owl was the father, Kuro was the master, and as long as Owl appeared to be dead, killed during the raid on the Hirata estate 3 years before the game begins, there was no tension between the two. Wolf served Kuro. He protected Kuro. He did what the code demanded without hesitation, because the code only demanded one thing, and that one thing was clear. But the Iron Code was always designed to break. Not to break Wolf, but to break his loyalty to Kuro. Because the hidden clause, the one Owl embedded in Wolf's training like a sleeper agent's activation word, says that if the father and the master come into conflict, the father wins. Owl built Wolf with a kill switch, and the entire story of Sekiro is about what happens when that switch is finally flipped. The game presents this conflict as a choice, a literal, mechanical choice that the player must make at a specific point in the narrative. Owl returns, he is not dead. He was never dead. The raid on the Hirata estate, the burning, the chaos, all of it was orchestrated by Owl himself as part of a long and patient plan to acquire the dragon's heritage for his own purposes. And now he stands before Wolf and invokes the Iron Code. "Obey me," he says. "Abandon Kuro. Give me what I want." This is the moment that defines the game, not a boss fight, not a dramatic cutscene, a question. Who are you loyal to? The man who made you, or the boy who trusts you? If Wolf obeys Owl, the story ends in fire. This is the Shura ending, the worst of the 4 possible conclusions, and it is also the shortest. Wolf abandons Kuro. He follows his father's command, and in doing so he severs the last thread of genuine human connection in his life, the bond with the boy who saw him not as a tool or a weapon but as a person. Without that connection, Wolf has nothing to anchor him. The violence that has always been his purpose becomes his identity. An identity becomes obsession. An obsession becomes something that the game calls Shura, a demon, a being that kills not for duty or survival, but because killing is the only thing that makes the emptiness inside it bearable. Emma tries to stop him. Ishin tries to stop him. Wolf kills them both, and then, in a final act of terrible symmetry, he kills the father who made him into this, because Ashura does not serve anyone. Ashura only consumes. But that is the wrong choice, or rather, it is a choice, and the game respects the player's right to make it. But it is a choice that leads to annihilation rather than resolution. The story wants you to choose the other path. It wants you to break the code. If Wolf defies Owl, if he looks at the man who raised him and says no, if he chooses the boy over the father, the tool over the hand that forged it, then something remarkable happens. Wolf stops being a weapon. He becomes a person. For the first time in his life, he makes a decision that is not dictated by the code, not compelled by training or obligation, or the deeply ingrained reflex of obedience that Owl spent years hammering into him. He decides for himself, and the decision he makes is that Kuro matters more than anything else in the world. Not because the code says so, because Wolf says so. This is the moment that makes Sekiro a love story. Not a romantic love story, but a story about the kind of love that exists between a protector and the person they protect, between a servant and the master who treats them like a human being, between a man who was raised to be a tool and the boy who looked at him and saw something more. Kuro gave Wolf the dragon's heritage. He shared his immortality with a shinobi he barely knew, not because he wanted a weapon, but because he saw a man who was about to die and decided that the world was better with him in it. That act of grace is the foundation of everything that follows. Wolf does not fight for Kuro because the code tells him to. He fights for Kuro because Kuro is the only person who has ever fought for him. "3 years before the main events of the game, before Wolf lost his arm, before the world cracked open along the fault lines of immortality and ambition, there was a night that changed everything. A night of fire and betrayal that Wolf cannot fully remember, because the memory itself was taken from him, broken into pieces and scattered like ash on the wind. The Hirata estate was the ancestral home of the clan that Kuro belonged to. It was a place of elegance and quiet wealth, a traditional Japanese compound of wooden buildings and ornamental gardens and paper screens that let the moonlight filter through in silver rectangles on the floor. It was the kind of place where you could imagine people living good lives, raising children, growing old in the company of beauty and the changing of the seasons. It was exactly the kind of place that the Sengoku period delighted in destroying. The raid came at night. A group of bandits led by a massive drunken brute named Yuzu descended on the estate with torches and weapons setting fire to the buildings and killing anyone they found. The attack appeared to be a simple robbery, the kind of violent opportunism that was common in an age of constant warfare. But it was not simple at all. Behind the bandits, hidden in the chaos like a hand inside a puppet, were agents of the Interior Ministry. And behind them, orchestrating everything with the patient, meticulous care of a man who plans his betrayals the way other men plan their gardens, was Owl. Wolf was there that night. He fought through the burning estate, cutting down bandits and trying to reach Kuro, who was hidden in a secret chamber beneath the main building. Along the way, he encountered Owl. His father was wounded, or appeared to be wounded, slumped against a wall with blood on his clothes and the laboured breathing of a dying man. With what seemed like his last words, Owl reminded Wolf of the Iron Code. Protect the divine heir. That is your duty. That is what matters. And then he pressed a key into Wolf's hand and told him to go. Wolf went. He descended into the hidden temple beneath the estate and found Kuro, small and frightened and surrounded by the smell of smoke. But between Wolf and the boy stood Lady Butterfly, his former mentor, the illusionist who had helped train him when he was a child. She was not there to protect Kuro. She was there to take him, for whom the game does not explicitly say. But her presence on the same night that Owl staged his own death, on the same night that agents of the Interior Ministry helped bandits sack the estate, suggests a coordination that goes far beyond coincidence. Wolf fought Lady Butterfly. It was the first time he had ever raised his sword against someone who had helped shape him into what he was, and it would not be the last. The fight was difficult, not just physically, but emotionally. Lady Butterfly was the closest thing to a mother figure that Wolf had ever known, if a mother figure can be someone who teaches you to kill and never once tells you she is proud. Her fighting style reflected her nature. She was an illusionist, a master of deception, who fought not with brute force, but with misdirection and manipulation. She created phantom butterflies that drifted through the air and exploded on contact. She summoned ghostly apparitions of the dead to fight alongside her. She moved through the arena with the lightness of something that was only partially real, perching on invisible wires and striking from angles that should have been impossible. Everything about her was a lie wrapped in a lie wrapped in the sound of wings. But her skill was real. The damage she dealt was real. And the sadness in her eyes when she recognized the boy she had once trained, now grown and standing before her with a blade drawn, that was real too. Lady Butterfly had made her choices. She had aligned herself with whatever faction orchestrated the raid, whether it was Owl or the Interior Ministry or some combination of the two. She had chosen power over loyalty, pragmatism over affection, and she accepted the consequences of that choice with the grace of a woman who had been calculating odds her entire life and had finally drawn a losing hand. He defeated her. She fell. And in the moment of her death, she looked at him with something that might have been admiration and might have been pity, and she told him that he had grown. It was the kindest thing she had ever said to him. It was also the last. Then someone stabbed Wolf in the back. The game leaves the identity of the attacker ambiguous in Wolf's memory, which is itself a significant narrative choice. The memory of the Hirata estate is presented as something fractured and unreliable, a dream that Wolf enters through meditation rather than a straightforward flashback. The edges are blurred, the details shift, and the truth when it finally emerges much later in the game, is worse than anything the distorted memory suggested. Because the person who stabbed Wolf was Owl. It was all part of the plan. Owl staged the raid to create chaos. He used the bandits and the Interior Ministry agents as cover for his real objective, which was to separate Kuro from his protectors and claim the divine heritage for himself. When Wolf proved too loyal, too effective, too much of an obstacle to the plan, Owl removed him. Not by killing him outright, because dead men do not serve purposes, but by wounding him mortally and trusting that the heritage in Kuro's blood would do the rest. And it did. Kuro, finding Wolf bleeding out on the floor of the burning temple, made a choice that a child should never have to make. He shared his blood. He granted Wolf the dragon's heritage, tying their fates together across the boundary of death, giving his protector the one thing that would allow him to continue protecting. Wolf did not die that night. He could not die. Kuro's gift had made that impossible. But the wound was deep enough, and the trauma was severe enough that Wolf's memory shattered, and he spent the next 3 years in a kind of living death, sitting at the bottom of a well in the Ashina reservoir, staring at the stone walls, stripped of purpose and identity, a weapon without a hand to hold it. Until a letter arrived, a note dropped into the well by a woman named Emma, at the request of a dying man named Ishin. "Your master is alive," the letter said. "He needs you." And Wolf climbed out of the well, and the story began. The first thing that happens when Wolf emerges from the well is a failure. It is important that the story begins this way, because Sekiro is a game about a man who fails and fails and fails, and then, through the accumulation of those failures and the stubborn refusal to accept them as permanent, finds a way to succeed. Wolf infiltrates Ashina Castle. He moves through the moonlit corridors and the guard posts and the wooden walkways with the silence of a man who was trained to be invisible. He finds Kuro. The boy is being held in a tower room, a prisoner of the Ashina clan, and when Wolf appears at his window, Kuro's face lights up with a relief that is almost painful to witness. His protector has returned. The oath still holds. They can escape together. They cannot escape together. On the bridge leading away from the castle, Genichiro Ashina is waiting for them. Genichiro is Ishin's adoptive grandson, the current military leader of the Ashina domain, and he is everything that Ishin was at the same age but twisted by desperation into something harder and sharper and more willing to cross lines that Ishin never would have approached. Genichiro wants Kuro. He wants the dragon's heritage. He wants to use the boy's blood to create an immortal army that will save Ashina from the Interior Ministry's invasion, and he is willing to do anything, sacrifice anything, become anything to make that happen. The duel on the bridge is the game's first real statement about who Wolf is and what he is capable of. And the statement is this: he is not capable of enough. Not yet. Genichiro defeats him. It is not even close. The Ashina Lord moves with a speed and precision that overwhelms Wolf's skill, and the fight ends with a single, decisive stroke that severs Wolf's left arm at the elbow. Kuro screams, Wolf falls, and Genichiro takes the boy and walks back into the castle, leaving Wolf to bleed out on the bridge like one more piece of wreckage from a war that has been going on for too long. But Wolf does not die. He cannot die. The dragon's heritage pulses in his blood, pulling him back from the edge of oblivion, and he wakes in a dilapidated temple at the base of the mountain, his left arm gone, his body broken, his purpose the only thing that survived the fall intact. The man who saved him is called the Sculptor. He is an old man, gaunt and worn, who sits in the temple carving Buddhist statues with a concentration that borders on the obsessive. His hands never stop. Even when he speaks, even when he eats, even when he sleeps, his hands continue to carve, shaping wood into the image of the Buddha with a mechanical precision that suggests the activity is less a hobby and more a compulsion. The Sculptor is important to this story, but we will return to him later. For now, what matters is what he gives Wolf: a prosthetic arm. The arm is a piece of extraordinary craftsmanship. It was not built by the Sculptor himself, but by a man named Dogen, a physician and inventor whose genius was matched only by his compassion. Dogen designed the prosthetic not as a simple replacement limb, but as a tool, a versatile platform that could be fitted with a variety of attachments, each one designed for a specific purpose. A grappling hook for traversal, a loaded axe for breaking shields, a flame vent for setting enemies on fire, a shield made from the shell of an ancient creature for deflecting attacks that no sword could parry. The prosthetic is an arsenal disguised as an arm, and it transforms Wolf from a one-armed cripple into something far more dangerous than he was when he had both hands. The gift of the prosthetic is also the gift of a second chance. Wolf straps it on. He tests the grappling hook, launching himself through the forest canopy with a speed and freedom that he has never experienced before. He flexes the mechanical fingers. He feels the weight of the tools hidden inside the housing, each one a solution to a problem he has not yet encountered. And then he turns toward Ashina Castle, where Kuro is waiting, and he begins to climb. There is a poetry in the prosthetic arm that the game does not explicitly state, but that resonates throughout every moment of gameplay. Wolf lost his real arm to Genichiro's sword. That arm was the arm Owl trained, the arm that obeyed the Iron Code, the arm that killed without question. The prosthetic that replaces it is something new. It is not Owl's creation. It is Dogen's creation, built by a doctor, a healer, a man who spent his life trying to help people rather than destroy them. The tools it contains are versatile, creative, adaptive. They can solve problems in multiple ways. They give Wolf options that a simple sword arm never could. In a very real sense, the loss of Owl's arm and the gain of Dogen's arm is the beginning of Wolf's transformation from a weapon into a person. He is being rebuilt, literally, with parts that were designed by someone who believed in saving lives, rather than ending them. The Sculptor understands this. When he gives Wolf the prosthetic, there is a weight in the gesture that goes beyond simple charity. He is passing on the tool that was once his own, the instrument he used during his years as a shinobi, and he is trusting Wolf to use it differently than he did. Better than he did. The Sculptor's arm brought death. He hopes that Wolf's arm will bring something else. Redemption, perhaps, or justice, or at the very least, the protection of one small boy who deserves to live in a world that keeps trying to use him up. The assault on the castle is the game's first act, and it establishes everything you need to know about what kind of story this is going to be. Wolf fights his way up through the outskirts of Ashina, through an army of soldiers and generals and war beasts, past a man on a horse who wields a massive spear and bellows his own name as a battle cry, past the burning wreckage of siege defences, past the bodies of men who have been fighting this war for so long that they have forgotten what they are fighting for, and at the top in the castle's main tower, he he finds Kuro again, and this time he also finds Ishin. The Sword Saint is old and dying. He coughs blood. He moves slowly, but his mind is still sharp, and his eyes still carry the weight of a man who has seen everything the world has to offer and found most of it disappointing. He looks at Wolf, this battered one-armed shinobi who has just fought his way through an entire army to reach a boy he was sworn to protect, and he sees something that pleases him. Not skill, not power, something rarer. Loyalty that has survived the test of failure. He gives Wolf a new name, Sekiro, One-Armed Wolf. It is not a title or an honorific. It is an acknowledgement. The old man with the sword looks at the young man with the prosthetic arm and says, in effect, I see what you are, and what you are is enough. There is a cost to Wolf's immortality, and it is not Wolf who pays it. Every time Wolf dies and resurrects, every time the dragon's heritage pulls him back from the void and sets him on his feet and tells him to try again, something happens to the people around him. A disease begins to spread through the land. It is called dragon rot, and it is one of the most quietly horrifying concepts in the entire game. Dragon rot manifests as a persistent, wasting cough. It is not dramatic, it is not spectacular. It does not transform people into monsters or drive them to madness. It simply drains them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the life force of everyone in Wolf's orbit begins to ebb. The sculptor coughs. Emma coughs. The merchants in their shops and the old women in their homes and the soldiers at their posts, one by one, they begin to cough. And as the dragon rot progresses, they grow weaker. They lose their colour. Their voices become thin and strained. They are dying, not from any wound or illness that a doctor could diagnose, but from the simple mechanical consequence of one man's refusal to stay dead. The game explains the mechanism with an elegant cruelty. The dragon's heritage does not create life from nothing, it borrows it. Every resurrection draws its power from the living, siphoning a tiny fraction of vitality from the people nearby to fuel the return. It is a tax levied on the innocent to pay for the hero's survival. And because the game is designed to kill you often, because death is not just a possibility but an expectation, the tax is collected frequently and without mercy. This creates a moral calculus that no other game has ever asked the player to perform. Every time you die, someone suffers. Every time you resurrect, someone grows weaker. The people who are kind to you, who sell you supplies and offer you advice and pray for your safety, are the ones being drained. Your progress through the game, your gradual mastery of its punishing combat is built on the slow deterioration of the very world you are trying to save. The hero's journey is literally killing the people who cheer for the hero. Kuro knows this. He has always known it. It is one of the reasons he wants to sever the heritage. He has seen what his gift does to the people around the person he shares it with. He has watched Wolf die and return, die and return, die and return, and each time he has felt the ripple of stolen life radiate outward into the world like a stone dropped into a still pond. The dragon's heritage is not a blessing, it is a parasite, and Kuro is its host, and every person who comes into contact with the host's protector becomes another victim. There is a substance called the rejuvenating sediment that can cure the dragon rot, drawing the disease back out of the afflicted and restoring their health, but the cure is temporary. It does not prevent future infections, it merely resets the clock, wiping the slate clean so that the next death can begin the cycle all over again. It is the game's way of telling you that the problem is not solvable within the system. The heritage itself is the disease, and as long as it exists, the people around its bearer will suffer. This is the genius of Sekiro's approach to immortality. It takes the power fantasy that every game offers, the ability to die and try again, the knowledge that failure is never permanent, and it turns it into a moral horror. You are not just respawning, you are stealing life from the innocent to fuel your own persistence. And the game makes you feel it, not through cutscenes or dramatic speeches, but through the slow, accumulating weight of watching the people you care about grow sicker every time you fail. The Sculptor is one of the first to show symptoms. His cough deepens. His hands, those steady, tireless hands that have been carving Buddhas since before you arrived, begin to tremble. Emma notices. She's a doctor, and she understands what is happening even before she can explain it to Wolf. The dragon rot is not a disease in any conventional sense. It cannot be treated with medicine or surgery. It is a spiritual affliction, a leeching of the life force that operates on a level deeper than biology. The people who catch it do not simply get sick, they begin to fade. Their stories, the side quests and conversations that make them feel like real people rather than furniture, begin to dry up. They have less to say, less to give, less to be. The dragon rot is killing them not in body but in spirit, draining the narrative potential out of their lives the same way it drains the vitality from their bodies. This is a game design choice that doubles as a philosophical argument. Every NPC in Sekiro has a story, a quest line, a series of conversations that reveals who they are and what they care about, and how the events of the game have affected them. Dragon rot locks those stories away. When an NPC is afflicted, their questline freezes. You cannot advance their story. You cannot learn what happens to them. You cannot help them or be helped by them. The game is telling you, in the most mechanical and literal way possible, that your immortality is costing other people their futures. You are hoarding life, and the hoarding is making the world around you smaller and quieter and emptier. This is what Kuro sees when he looks at the heritage. Not power, not a miracle. A machine that converts the lives of the innocent into fuel for one person's survival. A transaction that no one agreed to, conducted in a currency that no one can afford. And the only way to stop the machine is to turn it off, which means severing the heritage, which means that Wolf will die. Not temporarily. Not with the option to try again. Permanently. And Kuro has to ask the man who has been dying for him over and over and over to die for him one final time. The time that counts. The time from which there is no return. High on a mountain called Congo, far above the wars and the politics of the valley below, there was once a monastery. The monks who lived there had dedicated their lives to the study of Buddhist scripture, to meditation and prayer, and the slow, patient cultivation of spiritual discipline. They sought enlightenment in the traditional sense, a transcendence of the self, a dissolution of worldly attachments, an understanding of the nature of suffering that would allow them to move beyond it. They were, by all accounts, good men who had chosen a difficult path and walked it with sincere devotion. And then they discovered the waters, the rejuvenating waters that flow through Ashina's soil are especially concentrated on Mount Congo, The mountain sits close to the source, the deep underground reservoirs where the divine dragon's essence collects in its purest form, and the water that bubbles up through the temple's wells and streams carries a potency that is difficult to resist. The monks drank it. At first, perhaps, they drank it the way any person would drink clean mountain water, without thinking about it, without attaching any particular significance to it. But the water changed them. It made them stronger. It made them healthier. It made them feel more alive than they had ever felt. And for men who had spent years training their minds to resist temptation, this new vitality was an intoxication they had no defense against. The corruption happened slowly. It always does. The monks began to wonder whether the waters might be connected to the enlightenment they had been seeking through prayer. Perhaps, they reasoned, the divine energy in the water was the same energy that the Buddha described when he spoke of nirvana. Perhaps drinking the water was not a worldly indulgence but a spiritual practice, a faster and more direct route to the same destination they had been walking toward for years. The mind is remarkably good at constructing logical bridges between what we want and what we think is right, and the monks of Senpou Temple crossed that bridge without looking back. They abandoned the Buddha's teachings, not all at once, not with a dramatic declaration of apostasy. They simply drifted, gradually replacing their old practices with new ones that centered on the waters and their remarkable properties. The sutras gathered dust. The meditation halls were repurposed as laboratories. The prayer beads were set aside in favor of tools and instruments designed to study the phenomenon that was happening in their own bodies, because the water was changing them. It was making them something other than human. And instead of recoiling from this transformation, they embraced it. They began to experiment with ways to accelerate the process, to push the boundaries of what the waters could do. They discovered that certain creatures, parasitic centipedes native to the mountain, had been living in the rejuvenating waters for so long that they had become conduits for the dragon's power. If one of these centipedes was allowed to enter a human body and take up residence, it could sustain that body indefinitely. The host would not die. Could not die. The centipede would keep the flesh alive long after the spirit had rotted away. The monks began inserting the centipedes into themselves, willingly, eagerly. One by one they submitted to the procedure, allowing the writhing, many-legged parasites to burrow into their bodies and take root. The result was immortality of a kind. They could not be killed by conventional means. Their bodies healed from any wound. They could survive injuries that would destroy a normal person, but they were no longer people. The centipede-infested monks that you encounter at Senpou Temple are among the most disturbing enemies in the game. They move with a jerky, insectile energy that is fundamentally wrong. Their bodies bend in ways that human bodies should not bend. Some of them have visible centipedes protruding from their necks or their backs, the parasites having grown too large to remain entirely hidden inside their hosts. They attack with a mindless ferocity that has nothing to do with martial skill and everything to do with the desperate animal hunger of a parasite that needs to feed. But the monks' greatest sin was not what they did to themselves. It was what they did to children. The monks of Senpou Temple learned that the dragon's heritage could be replicated, or at least approximated, through a ritual that required a specific kind of vessel. A pure vessel, an innocent one, a child. they began to experiment on the children of the surrounding villages, taking them from their families under the guise of religious education, bringing them to the temple and subjecting them to procedures designed to turn them into artificial divine heirs, vessels for the dragon's power that the monks could control. Most of the children died. The procedures were crude, and the monks' understanding of the heritage was incomplete, and the bodies of children who had no natural connection to the dragon's bloodline simply could not contain the power that was being forced into them. They died screaming, or they died in silence, or they died slowly over weeks and months as the power consumed them from the inside. The monks buried them in shallow graves on the mountainside and brought in more children and tried again. One child survived, the divine child of rejuvenation. She emerged from the monks' experiments transformed, carrying within her a fragment of the dragon's power that was genuine and stable. She was, in every sense that mattered, a miracle, but she was also a prisoner. The monks kept her in a shrine at the heart of the temple, treating her with a reverence that was indistinguishable from captivity, worshipping her as a living god while denying her every freedom that a living person deserves. The divine child is quiet and sad and wise beyond her apparent years. She knows what was done to the other children. She knows what was done to her, and she carries the knowledge with a grace that is heartbreaking in its composure. She does not rage against the monks. She does not plot revenge. She simply endures and waits and hopes that someone will come who can help her do the one thing she has decided matters more than anything else in the world. End the cycle, return the dragon's power to where it came from, and let the children rest. When you first speak to the divine child, she offers you rice. It is a small thing, a handful of cooked rice pressed into a ball, offered through the window of her shrine with the shy, careful generosity of someone who has very little to give and wants to give it anyway. The rice is not ordinary rice. It has been grown in the soil of Mount Congo, infused with the same rejuvenating waters that transformed the monks, and it carries a mild healing power that restores Wolf's vitality. But the significance of the offering is not in its mechanical effect, it is in the gesture. The divine child, a girl who has been imprisoned and experimented upon and treated as something less than human for her entire life, responds to the first person who shows her kindness by offering the only thing she has. She is the mirror image of Kuro. Both are children burdened with a power they did not choose. Both are treated as objects by the people who should be protecting them. Both possess a moral clarity that puts the adults around them to shame. And both, in their different ways, arrive at the same conclusion. The power must be returned. The cycle must end. And the cost of ending it, whatever that cost might be, is worth paying. The Divine Child's quest line, if you follow it to its conclusion, is one of the most hidden and most rewarding paths in the game. It requires patience and attention, and a willingness to return to her shrine again and again, exchanging rice and conversation, and the slow, careful trust of two people who have both been hurt badly and are learning step by cautious step that not everyone in the world wants something from them. The child tells you about the other children. She tells you about the monks and what they did. She tells you about the holy chapters she has been studying, ancient texts that describe the dragon's original journey from the west and suggest that the journey can be reversed. And she tells you eventually about the plan that leads to the game's best ending. The plan that requires her to become the cradle for Kuro's soul, and carry the heritage back across the sea to the land where it began. She is afraid. She admits this. She is a child who has known nothing but the walls of a shrine and the cold attention of men who saw her as an experiment, and now she is being asked to walk across the world to a place she has never seen. But she is also determined, because the children who died so that she could live deserve something better than an empty shrine on a mountain where monks lost their way. They deserve an ending, and she is going to give them one. To understand Genichiro Ashina, you have to understand that he is not a villain. He is something more complicated and more tragic than that. He is a patriot. Genichiro loves Ashina. He loves it with the fierce, burning, irrational love of a man who has built his entire identity around a single place and a single idea: the land, the people, the mountains and the temples and the cherry blossoms and the ancient stubborn pride of a kingdom that has survived for 20 years on nothing but the strength of one old man's sword arm and the willingness of its people to die rather than submit. Genichiro loves all of it, and he is watching it die. The Interior Ministry's armies are at the gates. Ishin is on his deathbed. The generals are bickering. The soldiers are exhausted. The common people are afraid. Ashina is a candle burning at both ends, and Genichiro can see the moment when the flames will meet in the middle, and there will be nothing left. He cannot accept this. He will not accept this. And so he has decided to do the one thing that every other character in the story has tried and failed to do. He is going to make Ashina immortal. His plan is simple in its ambition and catastrophic in its implications. He wants Kuro's blood. He wants to use the dragon's heritage to create an army of soldiers who cannot die, who will rise from every wound and every battlefield and every defeat until the Interior Ministry runs out of men or the will to send them. It is a plan born of desperation, of a man who has exhausted every rational option and has nothing left but the irrational ones. And the tragedy of it, the thing that makes Genichiro sympathetic, even as he does terrible things, is that he is right about the problem. Ashina is going to fall. The question is only whether it falls as a mortal kingdom or as something else entirely. Genichiro has already been experimenting with the rejuvenating waters. He has been drinking the sacred sediment, allowing the waters to change his body in ways that make him stronger and faster and more resilient than any natural warrior. But the waters are not enough. They heal. They enhance. They can even, in extreme cases, prevent death for a time. But they do not grant the true, permanent immortality that the dragon's heritage offers. Genichiro needs the real thing. He needs Kuro. The irony that haunts Genichiro's arc is that his grandfather, Ishin, is the one person who could have helped him but chose not to. Ishin does not approve of his grandson's obsession with immortality. The Sword Saint has lived a long life, a life measured not in years but in the number of worthy opponents he has faced and the quality of the duels he has fought. He understands death. He respects it. He has come to see it not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a boundary that gives shape and meaning to everything that happens before it. Without death, there is no urgency. Without urgency, there is no courage. And without courage, there is nothing worth fighting for. Ishin sends Emma to warn Wolf. He arranges for the shinobi's escape. He gives Sekiro his name. Everything Ishin does in the story is designed to protect Kuro from Genichiro. because Ishin understands something that his grandson does not. Immortality will not save Ashina. It will destroy it. It will take the thing that makes Ashina worth saving, the mortal, fragile, beautiful human lives of its people, and replace it with something that is technically alive but spiritually dead. An army that cannot die is an army that has no reason to fight. A kingdom that cannot fall is a kingdom that has no reason to stand. Genichiro cannot see this. He is too close to the problem, too consumed by the fear of losing everything he loves, and so he presses forward with his plan, growing more desperate and more ruthless with every obstacle that Wolf puts in his path. He uses the rejuvenating sediment to push his body past its natural limits. He trains in heretical arts that the Ashina school of swordsmanship forbids. He acquires, through means the game does not fully explain, the Black Mortal Blade, a weapon capable of opening a gate to the underworld and pulling the souls of the dead back into the world of the living. This last detail is crucial. The Black Mortal Blade is the mirror image of the Red Mortal Blade that Wolf acquires from Senpou Temple. The Red Blade can kill the immortal. The Black Blade can raise the dead. Together they represent the complete power over the boundary between life and death. And Genichiro, in his final desperate act, will use the Black Blade to do something that redefines the scope of the entire story. The way Genichiro acquires the Black Mortal Blade is never fully explained, but the implications are dark. The blade is associated with the underworld, with the realm of the dead, with forces that even the most heretical practitioners of the shinobi arts consider forbidden. To wield it is to make a covenant with something that exists beyond the border of mortality, and Genichiro, who began his arc as a noble patriot trying to save his homeland, has crossed so far into desperation that he is now making deals with death itself. You fight Genichiro multiple times throughout the game, and each encounter shows you a different stage of his deterioration. The first time, on the bridge, he's a masterful swordsman who defeats Wolf with clean, disciplined technique. The second time, atop Ashina Castle, he is stronger but wilder, augmented by the rejuvenating waters, his movements carrying a frantic edge that was not there before. He tears off his armor for the final phase of this fight, and draws a black-bladed bow charged with lightning, fighting with the reckless abandon of a man who has decided that restraint is a luxury he can no longer afford. When Wolf defeats him here, Genichiro does not die. He retreats, he regroups, he plans, and in the final encounter, in the silver field where the game's ultimate battle takes place, you see what that planning has produced. Genichiro has used the Black Mortal Blade to cut his own throat, not to kill himself, to open a gate. His body is the sacrifice, the key that unlocks the door between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and from that door steps Ishin, not the old dying Ishin, the young Ishin, the sword saint in his prime, summoned against his will from the peace of death by a grandson who loved his country too much to let it die, and loved his grandfather too much to let him rest. The tragedy of Genichiro is complete. He sacrificed everything, his honor, his body, his humanity, his relationship with the man who raised him, and the ultimate fruit of that sacrifice was the resurrection of the one person who would have told him, with absolute certainty, that it was not worth it. Ishin did not want to be brought back. He had made his peace with death. He had lived a full life and fought his last fight and was ready for the quiet that comes after. Genichiro's love, the love that drove every terrible decision he made, did not save Ashina. It only added one more tragedy to the pile, but that comes later. For now, what you need to know about Genichiro is this. He is a good man doing terrible things for reasons that he genuinely believes are noble. He is willing to sacrifice everything, his honor, his body, his humanity, his relationship with his grandfather, for the chance to save the place he calls home. And the tragedy is that the thing he is reaching for, the immortality he craves, is the very thing that will make the sacrifice meaningless. You cannot save a mortal kingdom by making it immortal. You can only replace it with something that wears its name. Before we continue deeper into the story of Wolf and Kuro, let us pause for a moment and look at the world around them. Because the land of Ashina is not merely a backdrop for their journey. It is a character in its own right, a living thing that has been shaped and scarred and transformed by the same waters that flow through the veins of its people. And nowhere is this transformation more visible, more unsettling, more profoundly wrong than in the creatures that inhabit the wild places beyond the castle walls. The great serpent is the first thing you encounter that tells you this world is not what it pretends to be. It is enormous. Not large in the way that a snake can be large, enormous in the way that a mountain is enormous, its body coiling through the valleys and the caves and the ravines of Ashina like a river of scales and muscle that has been flowing through this landscape since before anyone thought to build a castle on it. Its eyes are vast and ancient and possessed of an intelligence that is not animal and not human, but something in between. Something that watches you with a patience that suggests it has been watching things for a very long time and has learned that most of them are not worth eating. There are two great serpents in Ashina. This detail is easy to miss because the game presents them in a way that makes you think you are encountering the same creature in different locations. But they are two distinct beings, and their existence tells a story about what the rejuvenating waters do to the natural world when they are allowed to flow unchecked for centuries. These serpents were once ordinary animals. Perhaps they were large to begin with, as some species of snake can be. But the waters changed them. They drank from the streams and the pools that carry the dragon's essence, and over the course of hundreds or thousands of years, the waters did to them what they do to everything they touch. They made them grow, they made them endure, they made them something that should not exist in a world governed by the ordinary laws of biology. The serpents are guardians of a kind, though they do not serve any master. They are territorial, they are ancient, and they are deeply, instinctively connected to the power that sustains them. When Wolf encounters them, they react with a hostility that goes beyond simple predation. They seem to sense what he is. They seem to know that the heritage in his blood is related to the waters in theirs, and this recognition makes them aggressive in a way that feels personal. You're not simply food to them. You are a rival. The Sunken Valley is where the serpents make their home, and it is one of the most harrowing environments in the game. It is a deep, narrow gorge carved into the mountains, its walls rising so steeply that sunlight reaches the bottom for only a few hours each day. The valley is populated by the Sunken Valley clan, a group of warriors who worship the serpents as gods and have organized their entire society around the creatures they revere. These warriors are not samurai. They are not shinobi. They are something older and stranger, men and women who have rejected the civilized world of Ashina and returned to a primal, almost animalistic way of life that centers on the worship of the great beings that share their valley. The clan members are fascinating in their devotion. They wear minimal armor and fight with a reckless abandon that suggests they do not fear death, possibly because they have seen what the waters can do and believe that death is a temporary inconvenience in a land where the boundary between living and dead is merely a suggestion. Some of them wield firearms, long-barreled rifles that they fire from the cliffside with devastating accuracy. Others fight in close quarters with a savagery that feels religious in its intensity. Each kill an offering to the serpent gods that watch from the darkness of their caves. The gun fort is the clan stronghold, fortified position built into the cliffs of the valley that rains down gunfire on anyone who attempts to pass. It is manned by warriors who have given themselves entirely to the defense of the valley and its sacred inhabitants. The long-armed centipede giraffe, a mini-boss who guards one of the fort's inner chambers, is a disturbing example of what the waters produce when consumed by a mind already primed for obsession. The centipede inside him drives his body in rapid, jerking attacks that are almost too fast to follow, his arms windmilling in a constant barrage of strikes that feel less like combat and more like the frantic twitching of an insect. Everything in the Sunken Valley is a corruption of devotion. The clan's worship of the serpents is sincere. Their reverence for the waters is genuine. But sincerity does not make a belief true, and the things they worship are not gods. They are animals, changed by the same waters that changed everything else, and the clan's devotion has not elevated them. It has merely given their descent into something inhuman, a structure and a purpose that makes it feel meaningful. They are one more example of what Ashina produces when the waters touch a mind that is already searching for something to believe in. The waters do not grant wisdom, they grant persistence, and persistence without wisdom is just a longer road to the same disaster. At the far end of the Sunken Valley, in a cave that reeks of poison and decay, lives the guardian ape. This creature is one of the most memorable bosses in the game, not because of its difficulty, though it is certainly difficult, but because of what it represents. The guardian ape is an enormous primate that has been living in the valley for an impossibly long time. It has been sustained by the rejuvenating waters, kept alive long past the natural lifespan of its species, and it guards a particular flower, the lotus of the palace, with a ferocity that borders on devotion. The flower is one of the ingredients that Kuro needs for the severance ritual, which means that Wolf must take it, which means that Wolf must kill the ape. He does kill it. He cuts off its head. The massive body crashes to the ground and lies still, and for a moment you think the fight is over. And then the body stands up. The headless corpse of the guardian ape rises to its feet, picks up its own severed head in one hand and a massive sword in the other, and attacks you again. This centipede that has been living inside the ape, sustaining its body the same way the centipedes sustain the monks of Senpou temple, is now visible, writhing from the stump of the neck, driving the dead body forward with the mindless mechanical persistence of a parasite that does not understand the concept of enough. This is what immortality looks like when it's stripped of all pretense. A headless corpse being puppeted by a worm. A body that continues to fight, not because it has anything to fight for, but because the thing inside, it will not let it stop. The guardian ape did not ask for immortality. It was not seeking enlightenment or trying to save a kingdom. It was an animal that drank from the wrong stream, and the waters turned it into something that cannot die. but has long since ceased to be alive. It is one of the saddest things in the entire game, and the fact that you have to kill it twice, once for its body and once for the parasite that refuses to let it rest, is a cruelty that the game imposes on you with full awareness of what it means. The guardian ape also has a mate. You discover this later, in a hidden arena deep in the mountains, where a second ape, smaller and less corrupted, fights alongside the reanimated corpse of the first. The second ape is alive in a way that the first is not. It moves with genuine fury and genuine grief, and when Wolf kills it, the headless corpse of the first ape cradles its body for a moment before returning to the attack, even in death, even without a head, even driven by nothing but the mechanical impulse of a centipede and the fading echo of an emotion it can no longer fully process. The guardian ape mourns. The waters of Ashina give life, but they do not give meaning. They do not give peace. They do not give the quiet, dignified release that every living thing eventually needs. They only give more time, and more time without purpose is not a gift. It is a sentence. We spoke earlier about the Iron Code and the hidden clause that Owl embedded in Wolf's training. We spoke about the choice the game presents, the moment when Wolf must decide between the father who made him and the boy who trusts him. Now it is time to look more closely at the father himself and understand what he truly is. Owl is one of the great villains in FromSoftware's catalogue, and what makes him great is how completely the game refuses to reduce him to a simple antagonist. He is not a madman. He is not a zealot. He is not driven by grief or revenge or any of the usual motivations that stories use to explain why powerful men do terrible things. Owl is driven by ambition. Pure, clear, uncomplicated ambition. He wants power. He has always wanted power. And the dragon's heritage represents the greatest concentration of power that has ever existed in the world he inhabits. He wants it the way a man dying of thirst wants water. Not because he has thought deeply about what he will do with it, but because having it is the point. The raid on the Hirata estate was Owl's masterwork. He planned it for years. He cultivated relationships with agents of the Interior Ministry. He coordinated with Lady Butterfly. He arranged for the bandits to provide cover for the real operation. And when the night came, he played his part with a cold, calculated perfection that would be admirable if it were not so deeply, fundamentally evil. He faked his own death. He manipulated his son's loyalty. He used the Iron Code, the sacred law he had taught Wolf to live by, as a weapon against the boy, exploiting Wolf's training and his trust and his love to make him do exactly what Owl needed him to do. The moment Owl stabbed Wolf in the back is the moment that crystallizes everything about his character. He did not hesitate. He did not flinch. He looked at the son he had raised from childhood, the boy he had named and trained and shaped into a reflection of himself, and he put a blade through his spine with the same cold efficiency he would bring to any other job. Wolf was an obstacle. Obstacles are removed. The fact that this particular obstacle called him father was irrelevant. And yet there is a moment at the end when Wolf fights Owl on the roof of Ashina Castle and defeats him, when the old shinobi is lying on the ground with his blood pooling around him, when he looks up at the boy who has finally surpassed him and says something that complicates everything. He says he is proud. It is possible that this is one final manipulation, one last attempt to control Wolf through emotion, to make the boy feel guilty for what he has done, to plant a seed of doubt that might grow into something useful if Owl somehow survives. Owl has been lying for so long that honesty would be the most surprising weapon in his arsenal. But it is also possible, just possible, that the pride is real, that somewhere beneath the layers of deception and the decades of calculated self-interest, there is a tiny, flickering flame of genuine paternal feeling that survived everything Owl did to extinguish it. A father's pride in a son who has become stronger than the man who made him. Not because of the training, not because of the code, but in spite of it. The game does not tell you which interpretation is correct. It leaves you with the ambiguity, which is the cruelest and most honest thing it could do. Because the truth about parents and children, about the people who shape us, and the choices we make to become something other than what they intended, is that the ambiguity is the point. You never really know whether the love was real. You only know whether it was enough. If you pursue the purification ending, you encounter Owl again, but this time in the memory of the Hirata estate 3 years before the main game. This is Owl in his prime. Not the aging, calculating schemer of the present, but the legendary shinobi at the height of his power, faster and stronger and more terrifying than anything you have faced. Fighting him here is fighting the myth of the father, the towering, invincible figure that every child carries inside them. And defeating him here is the act of growing up. It is Wolf finally becoming his own person, not by rejecting what Owl taught him, but by using those lessons in service of something that Owl never understood. Not power, not ambition, love. Simple, stubborn, irrational love for a boy who once pulled a dying shinobi back from the edge of death and asked for nothing in return. There is a place above the clouds where the waters flow from the source, and the blossoms never fall. It is called the Fountainhead Palace, and it is the most beautiful and the most disturbing location in the game. To reach it, Wolf must travel through the Wedding Cave, a passage that leads from the mortal world to a realm that exists somewhere between the earth and the sky. The transition is disorienting. You pass through dark stone corridors and emerge into blinding light, and when your eyes adjust, you find yourself in a place that looks like a painting of heaven, rendered by an artist who understood that heaven can be a prison. The Fountainhead Palace is an aristocratic compound of breathtaking elegance. Traditional Japanese architecture at its most refined, buildings of dark wood and white paper and curved tile roofs, surrounded by gardens of impossible beauty. Cherry blossoms fill the air, perpetually falling, perpetually replenished. A soft pink snow that never accumulates and never stops. The water here is clear and abundant, flowing through channels and pools and fountains, with the gentle, insistent murmur of something that has been flowing for a very long time, and intends to flow for a very long time more. The people who live here are the palace nobles. They were once human. They were the families who lived closest to the ever-blossom tree, the cradle of the divine dragon's power, and they were the first to drink deeply from the source. The waters transformed them over the course of centuries, stretching their lives beyond any natural limit, remaking their bodies into something elongated and pale and faintly translucent, as though the flesh itself was becoming water. They move slowly, they speak rarely, they drift through their beautiful compound with the unhurried grace of goldfish in a pond, and they watch you with eyes that contain nothing you would recognize as emotion. They are not hostile, most of them. They are simply present, existing, continuing. The centuries have washed away everything that once made them individuals, every ambition, every passion, every attachment, every fear, leaving behind only the act of being alive. They are the ultimate expression of what the rejuvenating waters produce when given enough time. Not immortality in any meaningful sense, just duration, time without content, existence without purpose, a life that stretches to the horizon in every direction and contains nothing worth walking toward. Some of them have regressed further. The Okami warriors, tall and fierce women who guard the approaches to the palace, retain a martial energy that the nobles have lost. They fight with lightning-infused weapons and move with a speed that suggests the waters enhanced their bodies in different ways. But even they have been changed by the centuries of isolation. Their culture has become ritualistic and insular, a closed loop of tradition that no longer connects to anything outside itself. At the heart of the palace, in a vast arena open to the sky, the divine dragon waits. This is the being that started everything. The creature from the west that crossed the sea and took root in the mountains of Ashina and poured its essence into the soil until the entire land was saturated with a power that was never meant to exist in the mortal world. When you fight it, and you must fight it, the encounter is less a battle and more a ritual, a ceremony of release. The arena is unlike anything else in the game. You stand on a field of clouds surrounded by ancient trees whose roots dangle into the void below. Lightning crackles across the sky, and the dragon emerges from the mist, enormous and beautiful and sad in a way that you can feel in your chest before your mind has time to process what it is seeing. Its body is pale as bone, its form a fusion of wood and flesh, and something that is neither. It has a single arm, holding a massive sword that it swings with a weariness that suggests it has been doing this for a very long time and would very much like to stop. The fight is conducted in the language of lightning. You catch the bolts from the sky and redirect them at the dragon, and with each strike, the creature weakens. It is not aggressive in the way that other bosses are aggressive. It fights because it must, because the connection to the mortal world compels it, because the ever-blossom tree will not release it until someone strong enough arrives to cut the cord. The dragon is as much a prisoner as any other immortal being in this story. It did not choose to be here. It did not choose to poison the land with its presence. It is simply trapped, like everyone else, in a cycle that no one asked for, and no one knows how to end. When the divine dragon is defeated, it gives you the dragon's tears. This is one of the key ingredients in the ritual that Kuro wants to perform, the ceremony that will sever the heritage and end the cycle of immortality. The tears are the dragon's grief, or perhaps its relief. A crystallized emotion from a being that has been trapped in a foreign land for longer than human history can measure, longing for the home it left behind. You hold them in your hand and they are warm, like blood, like the last breath of something that has been holding on for so long that the act of letting go feels like a miracle. The Fountainhead Palace is the game's most explicit statement about what immortality does to a civilization. The nobles who live there had everything: beauty, peace, safety, time without limit, and it destroyed them more thoroughly than any war or plague or natural disaster could have. They are not ruins. Ruins imply that something was once alive and has since died. The nobles of the Fountainhead Palace are something worse than ruins. They are a living death, a civilization that is technically still functioning, but that has forgotten why functioning matters. They eat, but they do not taste. They speak, but they do not communicate. They exist, but they do not live. They are the final, irrefutable proof that immortality without mortality is not life. It is taxidermy, a stuffed and mounted version of the thing it replaced, positioned in a glass case and left to gather dust while the living world moves on without it. The palace begins to crumble, the waters slow, the blossoms falter. For the first time in centuries, the people of the Fountainhead Palace experience the passage of time as something that moves, rather than something that stands still. And far below, in the castle and the valleys and the temples of Ashina, the effects are felt as well. The waters that sustain the land are weakening. The clock is ticking faster now, and everyone can feel it. We need to go back to the dilapidated temple now. Back to the old man who carves Buddhas and never stops. Back to the sculptor, because his story is the one that breaks the heart the most, and it has been waiting patiently at the edges of the narrative for the right moment to step into the light. The sculptor was once a shinobi, not just any shinobi. He was one of the finest warriors of his generation, a man of tremendous skill and tremendous rage who fought with a ferocity that made even other shinobi uncomfortable. His name then was Orangutan, a nickname that reflected his size and his explosive, unpredictable fighting style. He was trained, like Wolf, in the arts of the sword and the prosthetic arm. In fact, the prosthetic arm that Wolf wears was originally his. He was the first person to use it, the first to master its attachments, the first to discover the terrible freedom that comes from replacing flesh with steel. But the rage that made him such an effective fighter was also the thing that was destroying him. The sculptor's anger was not a surface emotion. It was not the kind of anger that flares up in the heat of battle and subsides when the fighting stops. It was a deep, structural fury that lived in the foundations of his personality, a rage at the world and at himself and at the endless cycle of killing that the shinobi life demanded. Every death he caused fed the fire, every battle made it hotter, and as the fire grew, it began to consume the man who carried it. In the world of Sekiro, this consuming rage has a name. It is called Shura. A Shura is a being that has surrendered entirely to the impulse of violence, a creature that kills not for any purpose, but because the act of killing has become the only thing that fills the void inside it. Ishin warned Wolf about the possibility of becoming Shura. The sculptor is the living example of what that warning means. He stopped fighting. That was his solution. He put down his weapons, he gave away his prosthetic arm. He retreated to the dilapidated temple and he began to carve, Buddha after Buddha after Buddha, each one a prayer for peace, each one an attempt to redirect the fire inside him into something that creates rather than destroys. The carving became his meditation, his lifeline, the thin thread of discipline that kept the rage contained. As long as his hands were busy shaping wood into the image of compassion, they could not pick up a sword and return to the work of death. But he was not curing himself. He was managing himself. The difference is everything. A cure removes the disease. Management only contains it, and containers can break. Over the course of the game, you can watch the sculptor's condition deteriorate. His cough grows worse. His conversations become shorter and more distracted. He begins to mutter about flames, he begins to smell of smoke, and his carvings change. The Buddhas he creates stop looking like Buddhas. They begin to look wrathful, their faces twisted into expressions of fury that the sculptor does not seem to notice, but that you, the player, can see with devastating clarity. The container is cracking. In the game's final act, when the Interior Ministry's invasion reaches its climax and Ashina Castle burns, the sculptor's rage finally breaks free. The old man who spent years carving Buddhas in a quiet temple transforms into the demon of hatred, a colossal entity of fire and fury that rampages through the burning ruins of Ashina, killing everything in its path. The demon is one of the most difficult bosses in the game, and it is also one of the most tragic, because underneath the fire and the horns and the monstrous scale of the thing, you can still see the shape of the man. The prosthetic arm is there, fused to its body, warped into a weapon of terrible destructive power. The rage that he spent years trying to contain is there, amplified beyond all recognition, burning hotter than the flames that consume the castle. Emma gives you a way to put him down. She tells you about the finger whistle, a shinobi tool that can cut through the madness and reach the man inside the monster, if only for a moment. When you use it in the fight, the demon flinches. It pauses. Something inside the inferno remembers being human, remembers carving Buddhas and sitting in a quiet temple and trying so hard to be something other than what the fire wanted to make it. The pause is brief. The rage comes back. But for that single moment you can see the sculptor and the sculptor can see you. And there is a recognition that passes between you that is too small for words and too large for the heart to contain. You kill the demon of hatred because there is nothing else you can do. The man inside it is gone. The fire has consumed everything that was him, and what remains is only the fire. But you kill it with the knowledge that it did not have to end this way, that the sculptor fought his battle for years, carved his Buddhas, held the line, and only broke because the world around him broke first. He was not weak. He was not evil. He was a man with a flame inside him who ran out of wood to carve, and the flame did what flames always do when they are not given something to burn. They find something on their own. The sculptor's story is the game's most personal meditation on the cost of violence. Wolf is a shinobi. Violence is his trade. The sword is his language. And the game asks, through the sculptor's example, whether anyone who lives by violence can ever truly escape it. The sculptor tried. He tried harder than anyone else in the story. He gave up his weapons. He gave up his name. He gave up his arm, the very limb that had been the instrument of his killing, replacing it with a prosthetic that he then passed on to Wolf like a curse being transferred from one generation to the next. He did everything a person can do to reject the part of themselves that destroys, and it was not enough. The demon of hatred fights with fire because fire is what rage becomes when it has been compressed for too long. It explodes, it spreads, it consumes indiscriminately, burning the guilty and the innocent alike, destroying everything in its radius not because it chooses to, but because destruction is what fire is. The sculptor's decades of Buddhist discipline, all those hundreds of carved statues, all those thousands of hours of patient meditative work were not a cure, they were a dam. And when the dam broke, everything behind it came flooding out at once. The flood was made of fire. There is a detail in the fight that most players miss. If you look at the Demon of Hatred's remaining arm, the arm that is not the prosthetic, you can see that it is still making the carving motion, even in the middle of a fight that is shaking the foundations of the earth, even as fire pours from its body and its fists crack the ground and the world around it burns. The arm that once held a chisel is still moving, still carving, still reaching for the piece that the sculptor spent his entire second life trying to find, and that was taken from him in the end by the same land that he was trying to protect. The sculptor deserved better. They all deserved better. But the waters of Ashina do not give people what they deserve, they give them what they fear. The story of Sekiro branches in its final hours, splitting into 4 distinct conclusions that represent 4 different answers to the question the game has been asking from the very beginning. What is the right thing to do with the power of immortality? The Shura ending is the first and the worst. We have already spoken of it. Wolf obeys Owl. He abandons Kuro. The Iron Code prevails over love, and the man who might have been a hero becomes a demon instead. Emma and Ishin try to stop him. They fail. Wolf kills them both and then kills Owl because Ashura does not serve anyone, and the story ends with the demon prowling the mountains of a land that will never recover from what it has lost. This ending is short and brutal and final in a way that the other 3 are not. There is no ambiguity in it, no hope, just the sound of a blade cutting through the last thing that mattered, and then silence. The Immortal Severance ending is the default. It is the conclusion you reach if you defy Owl and follow Kuro's plan without discovering any of the secret paths the game hides in its margins. Wolf gathers the ingredients for the ritual. He acquires the red mortal blade from Senpou Temple. He finds the lotus of the palace in the Guardian Ape's cave. He defeats the divine dragon and collects the dragon's tears. And then, in the flower field where the silver grass waves in the wind, he faces the final battle. Genichiro is there. He has been waiting, and he has prepared his last gamble. He draws the black mortal blade and uses it to open a gate to the underworld, and from that gate he pulls the soul of his grandfather. Not the old sick Ishin who is dying in his chamber, the young Ishin in his prime, the sword saint at the peak of his power, resurrected against his will, wielding a spear and a sword and the accumulated skill of the greatest warrior Ashina has ever produced. This fight is widely regarded as one of the greatest boss encounters in the history of video games, and it earns that reputation not through spectacle but through philosophy. Young Ishin does not want to fight you. He says as much. He respects Wolf. He admires what Wolf has become. But he has been summoned, and the summoning compels him, and so he fights with everything he has, which is everything. The duel is long. It is grueling. It passes through multiple phases, each one escalating in intensity, each one demanding more of you than the last. In his first phase, Ishin fights with the sword, and he is magnificent. He moves with the fluid, devastating precision of a man who has spent an entire lifetime mastering the art of the cut. His deflections are perfect. His counters are instant. He reads your movements the way a poet reads a page, understanding the meaning behind every gesture before the gesture is complete. In his second phase, he draws a spear, adding reach and power to his already formidable repertoire. He uses a gun. He uses sweeping attacks that cover the entire arena. He is no longer a swordsman. He is a force of nature. and in his third and final phase, lightning crackles around his body, and he becomes something that transcends the boundaries of human combat entirely. To defeat Ishin, you must use everything the game has taught you. Every deflection technique, every prosthetic tool, every moment of patience and aggression that the hundreds of deaths leading to this point have carved into your reflexes. The fight is a final exam, and the subject is not combat. It is perseverance. It is the willingness to face something that seems impossible and to keep trying, keep failing, keep dying and returning and dying again until the impossible becomes possible. And when it is finally over, when Ishin falls to his knees in the silver grass and looks up at the sky with the expression of a man who has fought his last fight and is at peace with how it ended, there is a silence that settles over the arena like snow. The wind moves through the grass, the blossoms drift, and Ishin, the Sword Saint, the man who carved a kingdom out of willpower and blood, speaks his final words, not about Ashina, not about legacy, about the fight, about the quality of the man who defeated him. Because in the end, that is all that matters to a warrior. Not whether you won, but whether you were worthy. Wolf gives Kuro the dragon's tears. Kuro performs the ritual. The heritage is severed. The connection between the divine and the mortal is cut, and the waters of Ashina begin to dry, and the power that sustained the land for centuries starts to fade. But the ritual has a price. Kuro dies. The severing takes his life because the heritage was woven into his blood so deeply that removing it is removing him. And Wolf, who has been fighting for nothing else but this boy's survival, is left standing in a field of silver grass with his master's body at his feet, and a mortal lifespan stretching ahead of him for the first time since he crawled out of that well. The final image of this ending shows Wolf sitting in the dilapidated temple in the sculptor's chair, carving Buddhas. He has taken up the old man's practice, not because he shares the sculptor's rage, but because he needs something to do with his hands now that they are no longer needed for fighting. He carves because Kuro is gone and the heritage is gone, and the purpose that defined his entire existence has been fulfilled, and what remains is the quiet, ordinary mortal life of a man who saved the world and now has to figure out how to live in it. It is a beautiful ending, it is a sad ending, and it is not the best one. The purification ending requires more from the player. It requires you to discover, through eavesdropping and conversations and a return to the memory of the Hirata estate, that there is another way to perform the ritual, a way that does not require Kuro to die, a way that requires Wolf to die instead. The Ever-Blossom, the tree that anchors the dragon's power to the mortal world, has a counterpart in the mortal realm, a connection that runs through Wolf's own body. If Wolf dies, truly dies, permanently and without resurrection, the anchor is severed, and the heritage can be removed without killing Kuro. Wolf does not hesitate. He has spent the entire game protecting Kuro. He has died for Kuro dozens or hundreds of times, and each time the heritage pulled him back. Now, for the first time, death will be final, and he accepts it with the same quiet, absolute devotion that has defined him from the first moment he climbed out of the well and began his journey back to the boy who needed him. He gives Kuro the dragon's tears mixed with the Ever-Blossom, and the ritual severs the heritage, and Wolf dies. For real this time. The last time. The only time that counts. Kuro lives. He grows up. He becomes a person in a world that is no longer poisoned by the waters of immortality, and he carries with him, for the rest of his mortal life, the memory of a one-armed wolf who loved him enough to let go. The fourth ending is the dragon's homecoming, and it is the hardest to achieve and the most hopeful. It requires a lengthy, hidden quest line involving the divine child of rejuvenation, the sole survivor of the monk's experiments at Senpou Temple. Through a series of obscure and easily missed steps, Wolf helps the divine child absorb Kuro's soul into her own body, creating a vessel that can carry the heritage back to its source. Kuro's physical body dies, but his consciousness lives on within the child, and the child, carrying both herself and Kuro, sets out on a journey to the west, to the land where the divine dragon came from, to return the heritage to where it belongs. Wolf goes with her. He walks beside her, his sword at his side, his prosthetic arm gleaming in the sunlight, escorting this small, fragile, impossibly brave person across the mountains and the plains and the sea, back to a place none of them have ever seen, to end a cycle that has been turning since before human memory. The ending does not show them arriving. It does not tell you whether they succeed. It simply shows them walking, together, toward the west, toward the sunset, toward a future that is uncertain but that they face side by side. This is the ending that Sekiro wants you to find, not because it is happy, though it is the closest thing to happy that the game allows, but because it is the ending that honors every theme the story has been exploring. It honors the dragon's heritage by returning it to its home. It honors Kuro by preserving his soul even as his body dies. It honors the divine child by giving her a purpose that redeems the suffering she endured. And it honors Wolf by giving him the one thing he has never had: a future that is not defined by obedience or violence or the code. A future that he chose for himself, walking beside someone he cares about, toward a destination that matters. The title of the game is a riddle, and like all good riddles, it has more than one answer. Shadows die twice. What does that mean? On the surface, it is a reference to Wolf's resurrection mechanic. He dies. He comes back. He dies twice before the game sends him back to the last checkpoint. Shadows die twice. Simple, mechanical, a gameplay feature dressed up in poetic language. But look deeper. Think about what a shadow is. A shadow is the dark outline of something real, a silhouette that follows the thing that casts it without ever possessing substance of its own. Wolf is a shadow. He was raised to be one. The shinobi is the shadow of the master, existing only in relation to the person they serve, defined entirely by the shape of someone else's life. The Iron Code made Wolf into a shadow. Owl's training made Wolf into a shadow. The entire philosophy of the shinobi existence is built on the idea that the self does not matter, that the individual is nothing, that the shadow serves the light and asks for nothing in return. Shadows die twice. The first death is the death of the self. It is the moment when the child on the battlefield became Wolf, when a person with the potential for a full and independent life was reduced to a tool, a weapon, a shadow that moved only when its master moved, and existed only to extend the reach of someone else's will. This is the death that Owl inflicted on a nameless boy when he picked him up from the mud and decided that the world needed one more shinobi, more than it needed one more human being. The second death is the death of the shadow itself. It is the moment when the tool breaks free. When Wolf defies the code and chooses Kuro over Owl, he is not just making a strategic decision, he is killing the shadow. He is destroying the thing that Owl made him, and becoming, for the first time in his life, a person who acts from conviction rather than compulsion. The shadow dies, and what emerges from its death is not another shadow, but something with substance, something real, something that can stand in the light and cast its own shape on the ground. Sekiro is a story about immortality, yes. It is a story about a dragon and a boy and a kingdom that tried to live forever and nearly destroyed itself in the attempt. But more than anything, it is a story about what it means to be a person, to have a self that belongs to you and to no one else, to make choices that are yours, not because a code demands them, or a father commands them, or a tradition requires them, but because you looked at the world and decided with your own mind and your own heart what mattered. Kuro understood this. He was a boy who carried the most powerful gift in the world in his blood, and he chose to destroy it. Not because it was easy, not because he was not afraid, but because he looked at what immortality did to the people around him, the monks who became parasites, the nobles who became ghosts, the warriors who became demons, and he decided that the world was better off without it. He chose mortality. He chose the finite, fragile, precious span of a human life, and he asked the man he trusted most in the world to help him do it. Wolf understood this too in the end. The shinobi who was raised to be a tool, who was trained to feel nothing and want nothing and exist only in the service of another person's will, found something inside himself that the training could not reach. Call it love, call it loyalty, call it the stubborn, irrational, deeply human refusal to let the people you care about face the dark alone. Whatever you call it, it was the thing that made Wolf more than a shadow. It was the thing that made him real. The land of Ashina is quiet now. The waters are drying. The blossoms are falling for the last time. The castle is in ruins. The monks have gone silent. The serpents have retreated to their caves, and somewhere to the west, on a road that stretches toward a setting sun, a one-armed wolf walks beside a child who carries the last light of a dragon in her heart, heading toward a place where the cycle can finally end. What they leave behind is a land that will have to learn to live without miracles. The waters that healed will dry up. The springs that granted strength will run clear and ordinary. The soil of Ashina will become just soil, no different from the soil of any other mountain valley in Japan, and the people who remain will have to face their illnesses and their injuries and their inevitable, unavoidable deaths the way every other person in the world has always faced them. With courage, with acceptance, with the understanding that a life is precious precisely because it ends. This is the gift that Kuro and Wolf give to Ashina, not immortality. The opposite, mortality, the restoration of death as a natural part of the human experience, the removal of the temptation that corrupted monks and warriors and kingdoms and turned the simple, beautiful act of being alive into a desperate, endless, hollow, clinging to existence that had long since stopped being worth the price. Every character in this story who sought immortality was destroyed by it. The monks became parasites, the nobles became ghosts, the guardian ape became a puppet, the sculptor became a demon, Genichiro became a sacrifice. Even the divine dragon, the source of it all, was trapped in a foreign land, longing for a home it could not reach, giving life to a world it was slowly poisoning. The only characters who found peace were the ones who let go. Ishin, who died with dignity, Wolf, who died with purpose, Kuro, who died with trust in the people who loved him. The game is not subtle about this. It is not hiding its theme in obscure item descriptions or environmental details. It is saying clearly and directly that the fear of death is the most dangerous thing a person can carry. More dangerous than a sword, more dangerous than a centipede, more dangerous than a dragon's blood in a child's veins, because the fear of death, when it is strong enough, will make you do anything. Betray your father, abandon your master, experiment on children, burn a kingdom, sell your humanity for one more day, one more hour, one more breath, and the only cure for that fear is the same cure it has always been: acceptance. The quiet, brave, desperately human act of looking at the finite span of your own life and saying, "This is enough, this is beautiful, this is worth every moment, precisely because the moments will end. The fire has burned low, and the night is almost over. Thank you for walking this road with me. Thank you for staying through the temples and the battles and the long, winding paths of a story that asked difficult questions and offered no easy answers. If sleep found you along the way, then the story did its work. And if you are still awake, still listening, still here at the edge of the dawn, then I am grateful for your company beyond measure. Subscribe to Nightfall lore if you have not already. Leave a like if the story moved you, and rest well wherever you are. The shadows are long, but the morning is coming, and some shadows, when they die, become something beautiful. Good night.